In his day, Sokolov was Dunwall's genius. He transformed our city with his inventions. Electricity for the factories and carriages racing along above the streets. As I grew up, his buzzing and glowing devices kept me safe. His stories always made me giggle, and his outrageous conversations shocked aristocrats and overseers alike. Now, all these years later, Kiran Jindosh is Karnaka's genius. A mad inventor who has given the Duke sinister machines that move like people but aren't. Clockwork soldiers that fight and kill. I've got to find out where Sokolov's being held and bring the old man back alive. Rescue one genius and cage the other before he creates an army of Clockwork soldiers.
Hello there, and welcome back to Dishonored 2. And no, that is not a joke timestamp you see. This really is an hour and 40-minute video. Mission 4 is kind of insanely long, to the point that I'm really surprised that they didn't split it into 2 separate missions, much like they did with the approach to the Atomaya and then the Atomaya itself. Well, that's the decision they made, and so the decision I made was to have it as one video because I am insane. With that aside, back here on the Dreadful Whale, we now have a few new items in our collection, such as the syringe we used to save Hypatia. Speaking of Hypatia, she's with us now. Apparently she had no trouble making it back to the Dreadful Whale. She's a resourceful woman, I suppose.
Back here, safe and sound. How did that old fool come to mean so much to me? You might want to talk to Hypatia before we head out. She's taken one of the rooms, just for a while, I think. Needed to be away from Atomaya.
The dreams were stronger. Is it a sign of recovery or relapse? Oh, you're here. Stay with me a moment.
Dr. Hypatia, can you remember anything that might help me? I need to find Anton Sokolov. He could be the key to unraveling the Duke's plans.
My memories are disjointed. The Duke is close to his grand inventor, Kiran Jindosh. That man has the empathy of a mantis. He seems to both admire and despise Sokolov. We visited Aramis Stilton. I liked him. But something bad happened. Just snatches of memory. Sorry.
You should rest easy for a while. Maybe some of that will help.
I hope so. I'm not sure I even fully understand what you did for me, but I owe you for helping me at Atomaya. Thank you.
It's as if she's emerged from a long, black dream. The spirit has been unburdened, and she's gaining strength each day. There's a sense within her of what she's done, but only impressions.
So yeah, overall, Dr. Hypatia is doing considerably better than when we last saw her, and that's good. Even if she is still in the process of recovering from her ordeals. So, the rewards for saving her
Megan must be up on deck.
are the 100 coins you get from Megan Foster clearing out the room that she was staying in, as well as that stack of Atomaya potions useful if you've run out of them. Now that gift of 100 coins, let's repay Megan for that, and help her with a few issues with the ship that she's been having, such as this leak here. Yep, that's a 5020. It would probably help if we could stop the flow of water, so let's look for a way to do that. And in the meantime, investigate any changes that have occurred to the Dreadful Whale.
That wasn't here before. Botany and diseases. Ramsey and the Crown Killer. 2 pieces of the puzzle. More to go. I wonder how recently this silvergraph image of Jindosh was made. With a couple dozen Clockwork soldiers, Jindosh changed the Empire. What would he do with an army?
And right here we have one of the most useful notes you can pick up in the entirety of the game. So useful that you can actually find it in numerous spots in the upcoming mission. They really want to make sure that you know how to deal effectively with the Clockwork soldiers. Oh hey, this wheel looks like it would fit on that pipe. Maybe this is our solution. And by maybe, it absolutely is. If there's an object lying around that you can interact with and it's not one of the usual standbys, chances are it's going to be used for something specific. That old video gameism. If you can do something with it, it's probably important. It's actually kind of an especially funny quote-unquote puzzle because for some reason they have 2 crank wheels. One in the bottom of the deck and one up here at the top in the captain's cabin. Well, we shouldn't need this anymore. Let's just toss it aside. That was a completely rational decision and no harm will come of it, I am sure. Who ever heard of 2 leaks? So that note right there was Megan Foster's thoughts on Emily. If you're playing as Corvo, it's her thoughts on Corvo. She's taken quite a shine to either of them.
Let's hope your friend doesn't sink the boat while we're gone. Ready?
All right, let's go.
All right, let's get underway. Jindosh is important to the Duke's inner circle. The Grand Guard watches his mansion, and they'll call down the entire city if they find out who you are.
I'll make sure they don't. You said there's a wall of light cutting off access to the carriage station?
Yes, but there's a black market shop nearby. They sell on the sly. Ever use a rewiring tool?
Corvo taught me the theory.
Good. Get past the wall of light, then ride the carriage to where Jindosh lives. And there's a reason people are afraid of his mansion.
I'll get it done.
Emily, take care of this crazy man and his Clockwork soldiers, then bring Sokolov back. He means a lot to me.
Welcome to the Aventa district. So, the mission is named after the eponymous Clockwork mansion, but it'll be a long while before we see even a glimpse of it. That's why this video is so long. It really is 2 separate missions kind of glued together. And that's even more obvious when we actually enter the Clockwork mansion. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, we actually have to try and get to it, which can be fairly difficult, because there are quite a few guards around. Fortunately, as long as you're not restricting yourself by using no powers, it's not all that difficult to get around without being spotted. There's plenty of places high up above where the guards will basically never look. Even at their maximum perceptiveness, they'll only ever look so high up and so high down. So if you can gain enough vertical distance on them, then they basically can never spot you. There's also quite a few hidden goodies up here, such as this outsider shrine. Didn't work out too well for that man, but it shall work out very well for us.
I'll tell you a story about Kirin Jindosh, a prodigy from Karnaka. Self-taught, he was hailed by the Academy of Natural Philosophy as a genius who would surpass Sokolov and bring about an age of enlightenment. But just 2 years after his arrival, he was banned from the Academy for life, for reasons that are still not public. When they deported him, he left behind a machine that drank seawater. playing music that brought listeners to tears. They probably took it apart, and it has never worked since.
So, this is the first information that we've really learned about this Jindosh fella. He's a genius, unrivaled even by other geniuses of the era such as Sokolov or Hypatia.
It ain't my job to check on the grind. Hello?
But unlike them, he has significantly more issues, shall we say. He's not quite as empathetic as Dr. Hypatia, for example, to put it lightly. So, to make it to the next part of the mission, we're going to have to take a carriage, but unfortunately the carriage station is blocked off by a wall of light, so we may have to deal with that. Before then though, we're going to be doing plenty of exploring, such as this poor guardsman's apartment. Looks like there was some sort of rough struggle here. Couldn't have been a thieving though, given all the valuables are still about. What could have happened here? Ah, this note makes it quite clear. He was doing some business for Brianna Ashworth, one of the conspiracy members. And for his hard work had just received a nice gift of a fine bottle of fancy wine. I think we can all surmise how that turned out. So that bone charm that we picked up is perhaps one of the most useful ones if you're playing non-lethally. It boosts the speed at which you move when you're carrying a body, and if you're playing non-lethally, you're going to be doing that quite a bit. It's not a huge boost, but every little bit helps. Unfortunately, we've kind of run out of bone charm slots, so we might have to upgrade our capacity. And fortunately, there is in fact a black market shop in the area that will let us do just that. Of course, we actually have to get to the black market shop, which requires going through this plaza. Probably one of the most difficult sections in the entirety of this level if we're being honest. Especially if you're not using powers. With powers it's not so bad, just wait for the proper guards to be looking away, and bamf about a few spots and you basically will never be spotted. If you don't have the ability to just instantly teleport a great distance, it is much rougher. I still love how the guards just never notice the fact that they have a giant needle sticking in them. Yeah, that will never get old. But yeah, with that most problematic guard taken down, it's not too difficult to get over here. Especially if we make use of Far-Reach's extra momentum boost. That really is what sells it for me over Corvo's Blink. It's so useful in getting extra far in situations like that, and making it past obstacles that Corvo's Blink simply can't.
I need protection. The Grand Guard doesn't do its job.
Well, no shit, you're a black market.
I don't know you.
I'm new to Karnaca. I need a tool that can rewire a wall of light, the kind the Grand Guard uses, and I'd prefer not to explain myself.
I can help you out, but not right now. Don't even linger here. I'm supposed to get a visit from Paolo, someone you don't want to meet. Come back later.
Understood.
You should go. We can do business another time. Like I said, Paolo is coming by.
Hey. Don't underestimate us. We're pretty capable, but maybe we should take her advice.
You're gonna pay for his death!
Yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what's going on here, but it seems that one of the Grand Guard came over to investigate. Maybe they did catch a glimpse of us. And then they were swiftly dealt with by Paolo and his buds. So yeah, we probably really should follow her advice and hide. Fortunately, there is a handy crawl space right up here. Let's learn a little bit about Paolo, his deepest, innermost secrets.
Powers into something more than just a street gang. How Karnaca has fallen since the old days. With your help, Perhaps it will not descend into complete ruin.
I need 8 new cutters. Short blades, the good stuff. Morley steel.
I know what you mean.
Do you? Because last time, you gave me some backwater foundry garbage that wouldn't hold an edge. And snapped against Grand Guard armor.
I got taken on that deal too. But I'll make it up to you, Paolo. Lop off maybe 10%?
30. Because I like you. By next week.
That's fair. I made a bad faith trade and I regret it. You'll have the cutters, I promise.
Good, good. These are strange times. Overseers in the Dust District, a witch empress, and these Clockwork soldiers protecting their aristocracy. All bad for business. But if I get my way, Karnaca will be a different city a year from now.
He's clever, this one. With aspirations. You'd be surprised how high up he wants to be. The Helmers are his family. He's done terrible things to protect them.
So yeah, Paolo is kind of a big deal.
I'm told they robbed one of our shops. I'd like to see them try it here.
Oh yeah, haha, I'd like to see them try it here too.
Situation in the Empire
Them,
has driven
not
the
me.
prices up, I'm afraid.
So, we have a few new upgrades available, one of
That's what
which
I
we will
have
be
for
purchasing
upgrading your equipment.
post-haste. Instant sleep dots. I'm sure you can see exactly why that's so incredibly useful. That situation we had with the guard earlier, where he took a little while to drop, no longer a problem. And we pick up a few extra bone charm slots as well.
Sometimes I wish I had the Grand Inventor among my clients. But I've heard he's not so easy to please. A deal well made.
Apologies for talking over some of her idle dialogue. Some of it is interesting. Some of it less so. And here we have the two big purchases,
Come
which,
back soon. I mean, if I'm still here.
much like last time, we won't be taking for money. Anyway, just equipping that Undertaker Bone Charm now that we have the free slots. Could put on a few others, but none of them are especially
Placed on the
worth
cafe
bothering
down
with.
at the docks, but the smell of fish blood was stronger than the smell of morning coffee. I had to sell it.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty shitty location for a coffee shop. Probably should have thought about that before setting up shop. So, Paolo and his men haven't quite left the area. They're hanging out in that alley down there, and we could deal with them if we wanted to.
Believes he could run Sokolov better than the Duke.
Yeah, it's not really all that high of a bar. But, it's probably best if we don't. He is one of the most wanted men in Karnaca for a reason. And, not just for ordinary reasons either, as we'll be seeing.
Hey, times are hard. Help me out if you can. Appreciate it. I'll let you in on a secret. I saw people coming and going recently, looking for whale oil, up to something. You watch yourself. The Grand Guard aren't too friendly to strangers.
Yeah, we're well and familiar with that. So, maybe we should be looking for those suspicious people. They sound like they might have aught of interest to us, and though our way into the building is barred, of course, we always find a way in. I think you can actually make it up here even if you don't have any of your powers available. But it does require a lot more tricky platforming, so I am thankful I just don't have to deal with that bullshit. I do, however, still have to deal with this bullshit. Yeah, even if you're playing this game blind, by this point you're probably well and used to dealing with blood flies. Any threat they might have held due to how they're described in the documents is pretty much completely vanished from your mind at this point. And so similarly, we're not even going to bother sneaking through these sections. At least not when it's just blood flies. As for why this place is infested, presumably it was more idiots trying to earn a little bit extra coin by farming them. The blood amber and husks being quite valuable after all. And as in pretty much all of the previous instances, it turned out quite poorly. Oh, and can I just say, I really like the placement of that sign. Report all theft in front of a shop that was quite clearly robbed. It's a nice little bit of irony. Well, there's a few bits of treasure that were left behind. Whalebone might not be too useful for most people, but for us it will come in quite handy. Eventually.
Impressive how you managed to get there. Be careful. Those people in the oil tanks might still be around.
Thanks for the warning, chum. Unfortunately, it seems we won't be able to avoid them because we're kind of locked in here now. Well, just head forward stealthily and silently and we'll probably be fine.
You said whale oil. I got it for you. Not easy to pinch either.
No, you screwed up. It won't work without another tank. Not enough blast. You gotta trust me on this.
All right. I don't know shit about explosives. Never said I did. Go out again later and find some more.
Good. You can't rush jobs like this. It takes a smooth hand.
We can't piss around here forever either. Eventually some wanker will see us and the howlers will catch wind. But I hear you. One more tank.
Yeah, girl. Didn't you ever pay attention in school? It's exactly 3 whale oil tanks that cause a massive explosion. Not one more, not one less, 3 exactly. It's just science. So yeah, these two are trying to break into the black market, and they've already done most of the work towards that. We only need to bring one more source of explosion here. And though we could do that right now, we're going to leave it off for a fair bit. We don't really gain anything by waiting until later to do it, that's just what I felt like doing here. So feel free to rob it right away as long as you've made your purchases. And with that, we're done with this section of the mission, so let's continue on. Unfortunately, making it out of this little side alley without being spotted by one of the Grand Guardsmen is probably one of the more difficult things to do in this mission. Because at any time, there's possibly 1 out of 3 that's looking right over here. And as we've established before, on very hard they are quite eagle-eyed. That's why I took out that one guardsman with a sleep dart earlier. With him taking a well-deserved nap, it is so much easier to make your way to this back alley. Of course, we're not in the home clear just yet. Someone has clearly set up some sort of operation here.
I'm bored. Someone should have come through already.
Hush. You'll tip off the mark.
How long are we gonna wait for some lost aristocrat to stumble through?
Long as it takes. You want to eat, right?
Maybe this ain't such a good spot for an ambush.
Guards shaking people down. More blood fly. Yeah. People just ain't walking the streets anymore.
Getting hard to make a decent living.
I know, right? It's so hard for an honest thief these days. So yeah, this is the first of several encounters where a gang will try and ambush you.
You there! I need your help.
And I do hope you won't ever fall for these ambushes because they are quite obvious. They can still be pretty tricky encounters to deal with, but sleep darts make quick work of anything. There's a reason why you're only limited to 5 at a time. And keep that in mind because there will be a number of situations ahead where I very well wish I had restocked on sleep darts. And that note there tells us one of the more interesting bits of information. Apparently some of her friends tried to take down Paolo, but upon attacking him he kind of disappeared and turned into a swarm of rats. Might want to keep that in mind if we ever have to get up to any nasty business with him. As for that bottle there, that's the special Howler's Dust. You can use that to temporarily stun enemies. It's basically a flashbang. I personally don't find it too useful though, just because the enemies don't stay stunned for all that long. So if you don't take them out quickly after using it, you're just gonna get spotted anyway.
They may just smoke flash it.
So, with those encounters dealt with, we're pretty much done for a while for dealing with guards. So we're kind of free to just run about and explore. And that's one of the reasons why I do try and take down as many guards permanently as possible. Even if oftentimes it's easier just to sneak past them without ever interacting with them, if you want to explore in adjacent areas or head back through those areas where the guards were, it's better if you just take them down at the first opportunity. Granted, this does often lead to me getting into troublesome situations, so I suppose it's a pick your poison sort of situation. Do you want to deal with trouble now or potentially later? Anyway, the building we're in now is somewhat interesting. There's a few useful collectibles worth picking up, such as this black bone charm. Unfortunately, the particular effect carried by this black bone charm is honestly more of a detriment. It sounds pretty good at first, a shockwave upon landing. Ooh, I could use that to knock enemies out. The issue is that the effect of the shockwave depends on the distance that you drop, and that's not always an easily managed thing. So if you only drop a little bit, you'll just cause a whole bunch of noise as you rustle objects nearby, and draw every guard in the immediate area to you. And if you're trying to play non-lethally and you drop too far of a distance, you'll end up killing the guards rather than just knocking them out. So while this can potentially have some utility, it's too finicky to be worth using in my opinion. Beyond the outsider artifact, this apartment here in particular is worth exploring, and not for the lock safe, although that certainly does help, but for some extra lore details you end up learning. As it turns out, this apartment is a base for the Regenters, people who supported the previous traitorous Lord Regent when he tried to take over the crown. They're still alive since Emily did not have them executed, and they're basically just up to no good here. It is a decent source of world building and a minor source of humor, just because despite their best efforts they really haven't accomplished anything. They're kind of incompetent. Oh, and if you weren't paying close attention, the combination for that safe is written on the chalkboard. Only 2 digits, but you can just randomly move the third tumbler about until you figure out what the third is. And not the first time a puzzle like that will show up.
What are you covering your face for?
I have plenty of reasons to cover my face, such as the fact that I don't want to look at your ugly mug. So yeah, that's pretty much it for side explorations in this area, so let's get going to our main goal. So there's the whole wall of light that you can rewire to move past, or you can just disregard that entirely and fire reach / blink up to the top of the building. I'm pretty sure you can make it up here even without any outsider powers if you're feeling really determined. So there's no reason not to use this vantage point. It even keeps you out of sight of these 2 guards who wander in. Drop takedown. Truly the most useful technique in our arsenal. And no magic required. A newspaper article about the Howlers. That's the gang that Paolo controls. They've been vying for power in Karnaca recently. And if you've forgotten, Mindy is one of their number as well. That's why she's so wanted. So yeah, at this point, we don't really have a reason to disable the wall of light. All it would do is draw attention, so aside from opening up that shortcut door, that's about all we're gonna do here. There's a little booth there, but until we pick up the key at the black market, we can't really do much, so let's just head on to the upper Aventa district. Yeah, nope, we're not going to the Clockwork Mansion just yet. We still have another entire section to go through. Again, there's a reason this video is an hour and 40 minutes. At least we get to enjoy a nice roller coaster ride along the way.
I can see Jindosh's mansion from here. The carriage line is blocked. I'll have to unlock the gate.
Yeah, the game kind of just leaves you here right in plain sight for any of the gods to spot. Maybe not so on the lower difficulties, but you better believe it, if you don't book it, you will get seen by a god. So as Emily just said, to progress, we're gonna have to find a way to unlock the gate. It is locked by a code, so we'll have to find out wherever that's hidden. And that means exploring this nearby god building. I'm being extra cautious here by using far reach to warp about. You can be seen by gods, but you speed by so quickly that they'll only ever slightly notice you, if that. The funny thing is though, if this other god here isn't actually looking in your direction, you can just walk past even standing. And this dude will oftentimes not notice you. He is that intent on typewriting. Just something amusing I thought I'd mention. It's to the point that you can actually leave him there and he probably won't ever be too much trouble, but again, erring on the side of caution, it's best to just knock him out, considering that enemies cannot be woken up in this game. It's actually one of the things I'm not so much a fan of.
Give me a handful of the Clockworks and I'll clean up the dust district.
I don't know. Maybe the tall boys were better from the time of the rat plague. They made people stand up straight.
Times change. If the Duke has his way, we'll have an army of the Clockwork soldiers by this time next year.
Hey, that was a rare mention of the tall boys. An enemy type from the first Dishonored that, much like the music box toting overseers, we never see in this game. Which is kind of a grand shame because the tall boys were pretty fun to deal with. I guess they must not have had the necessary resources or time to include them in addition to their new enemy types, oh well. But yeah, as I was saying before, one of the things about this game that I'm not a huge fan of is how, once you've knocked out an enemy, they never wake up, no matter how much time you give them. Gods can't even wake up their knocked out allies, and I feel like that's a major misstep. Because in stealth games where that's the case, you never have a reason not to just knock out gods. And it makes killing them or ignoring them entirely less good options. I feel that non-lethal should always be the tougher option because, you know, you're being good, with lethal being the more efficient and ruthless method, and thus more effective. But that's just me. So, funny little bit of world building here. The gods arrested and were starting to interrogate the writer of an article against the Clockwork soldiers, but in the midst of the interrogation they ended up kind of siding with him. As it turns out, if you treat your gods like dirt and then replace them with mechanical equivalents, they're not too fond of following your orders. Just little things like that do a lot to humanize these otherwise copy-pasted gods, and actually gives you a reason to not want to kill them. So I very much appreciate stuff like that. Actually, there was another bit of similar world building in a previous note that I kind of glossed over, where some of the gods had planned to, if they saw Emily, try and capture her themselves rather than reporting her to their superiors like they're supposed to. Now, that doesn't actually make me sympathetic to them, but it does flesh them out a little bit more, and actually makes them feel like real people that are thinking real things, and not just gods in a video game that you choose to either knock out or kill. Again, if there's one thing that Arcane is really good at, it's world and setting building. So that's the gate code that we can use to progress along the railway. But we also picked up a key for a side alley, so rather than moseying on just yet, let's get to some more exploring. If you're wondering why I'm moving so slowly through this building even though we've cleared it out, it's because sometimes there's a guardsman who ends up wandering in from outside, and I've had previous stealth attempts, not in the course of recording this LP, but just previous playthroughs of mine, where he completely ruined them by showing up out of nowhere, contrary to my expectations. So now, even if I'm sure he's probably not going to show up, I'm going to act like he is, and be extra cautious. Speaking of being cautious, you do want to move carefully along these standpoints here. The guards aren't all that great at looking up, but sometimes they're in the position to see you if you're in a less than opportune spot. And making good use of Far-Reacher's momentum, we make our way over to this side alley here, where it seems some people were having a nice cup of tea. Wonder if we'll get to meet these folks. They seem like interesting sorts, even though we don't really know anything else about them. But just having tea in a dark abandoned alleyway? Certainly sounds interesting to me. And once again being cautious here because there are guards that patrol about, and depending on how fast you move through the area, when you get here they might be in different spots. And with Dark Vision's reach not being all that amazing, it does do to be careful. Fortunately, the only thing this guard noticed was a rat, so we're pretty good. Good thing we're not a PETA activist, otherwise we'd be simmering in our britches right now. Let's just place this guard where he hopefully won't be discovered. He does have a few compatriots wandering about that we do have to watch out for. So, in lieu of exploring street level, let's try and head up through this building here and see what we can find. It seems to be inhabited, locked even. So I make a few mistakes in this mission as far as stealth goes, none of them too major. And one of them is here of all places. Trying to loot a civilian's home without them freaking out and noticing you is insanely hard. Yeah, look at that. I poked out my head just the briefest inch and they all immediately noticed. It's a weird thing where I guess to make up for the fact that they don't immediately go after you, unlike the gods, the civilians seem to have way better eyesight than the gods ever will. If you are even anywhere in their vicinity and not completely behind cover, they can pretty much always spot you. And if you stick around or otherwise behave suspiciously, then that's when they'll start freaking out and alerting all of the guards in the nearby area. And it results in them honestly being a bigger threat than the gods in a lot of instances. Like, I try and be stealthy here and take them out without freaking out, but as it turns out, it doesn't go so well. Fortunately, they can't run quite as fast as us.
Leave me alone.
And they are quite weak to Vulcan neck punches. So yeah, that counts as like 1 or 2 detections, I forget exactly what. But it's still worth coming in here anyway, just because there are a fair few valuables. And as always, some good old lore. And as you can tell by the thrum of the beating heart, there's an outside artifact nearby. Honestly, it's probably for the best that we came in here. Any normal person who ends up with these always seems to turn out horribly in the end. So we probably did them a favor. Like, for example, this apartment over here, which looks to be quite posh, given that there is a painting on the wall. It too has an outsider artifact in it, and it too is in considerable disarray, and being quite infested with blood flies. Almost like anything related to the Void or the Outsider is not good to be dealing with. So, aside from the collectibles, the main reason to head through that side alley, or through the wall of light if you disable it, we chose not to because as soon as you disable it, a bunch of the guards freak out and immediately run upstairs into the building, and I'd rather not deal with that. But yeah, the main reason to come here is it gives you an alternate way to approach the Clockwork Mansion. Rather than taking the carriage all the way there, you could instead choose to platform across several dangerous precipices. We won't be doing that, of course. I mean, it sounds pretty fun, but if you recall, one of our main goals here is the recovery of Sokolov. And trying to come back this way while carrying a very aged man doesn't seem like the best idea to me. So yeah, we've pretty much finished off this area as far as exploring for goodies goes, so let's make our way back to the carriage. Dealing with a few extra guardsmen along the way, just to make our retreat a bit easier. Come on, you jerk, just look away for a second. You won't be displeased, because you'll be unconscious and thus not feeling anything. Yeah, sometimes it's best just to play the waiting game. Not the most exciting to watch, I realize, but hey, I'm not all that skilled at this game. This is about the best I can offer. At least without spending like 20 hours to get the perfect take for this mission. And believe me, I actually did take a fair amount of time trying to get an extra good take here. This mission is probably one of the hardest in the game if you're going for max collectibles. If you're just going for the main goal, it's not so bad, but if you want to pick up everything of note, then boy howdy do you have plenty of rough situations to deal with. I'm a bit paralyzed here because I'm not sure quite how to make it through without being spotted. Fortunately, things work out. So, do you remember the passcode for the carriageway here? I sure hope so, because I don't. I was actually quite close, I just misplaced two of the digits. 052 as opposed to 502. You'll forgive me for mixing them up. And you'd think the guards would be alerted to all this noise and commotion, but nope. So with that, we are finally on our way to the Clockwork Mansion. As you can see by the timestamp, we still have most of the video to go. If you thought it took a while just to get up here, then oh, wait until we get into the mansion itself.
The mansion has a strange beauty to it. Maybe I'll find a way to end this without killing Kieran Jindosh. All right, I need to eliminate Jindosh and find Anton Sokolov.
Welcome to my home, stranger. The door is always open to those with the will to pass the threshold. If you're here by appointment, then proceed and bide your time. Otherwise, I'd be remiss if I didn't inform you about the defensive mechanisms employed here, which are quite formidable. Many have entered without invitation, for reasons as myriad as the fish in the ocean. But of those who've dared to explore further, Very few have found their way back out.
There are such strange and wonderful things living down in the deep.
Emily confirmed Cthulhu fangirl. So yeah, the Clockwork Mansion does a pretty good job of selling itself right out of the gate, so I'm actually going to avoid commenting for the most part and just let you enjoy.
Who would build something like this? And why?
Someone's activated one of the mechanisms in my house.
Jindosh.
Welcome, visitor. My home is always open. It's one of my great curiosities, seeing how the common mind navigates these shifting rooms. I'm Jindosh, but you must know that. Before you stands an invention that will endure beyond my time. The Jindosh Clockwork Soldier. Marvel at the Clockwork Soldier's hardened metallic skeleton and razor-sharp blades. The miniaturized whale oil tanks are spread across the frame and hidden behind protective amber wood panels. Visual awareness in the front and back. Auditory detection in case the head unit sustains catastrophic damage. My greatest creation. I invite you to continue, stranger. Just come up the stairs. Meet with me face to face in the upper hall. There you are. Magnificent. Now that I see you, I've worked out who you are. Not a hired cutthroat. Your clothes are too fine. An aristocratic thrill seeker? That's closer. You've trained with weapons formerly, but you're not a salon fencer. There's a bit of back alley in your movements. All that, and you have your father's eyes, your imperial majesty. Welcome, Lady Emily Caldwin.
Impressive, Jindosh. Then you must also know why I'm here.
I'd assume my involvement with the Duke brought you to my door. Or maybe you're after washed-up Anton Sokolov, comfortably residing in the assessment chamber. Either way, come find me and take whatever it is you seek. But if you fall, I'll have your body carried to my lab for dissection and study. Until either comes to pass, your secret is safe with me.
I'll see you soon, Jindosh.
Until then.
Okay, so I'm back.
Clockwork soldiers, there's an interloper in my home.
Yeah, you want to get moving quickly. Once Jindosh activates things here, they get rather dicey for us. Plenty of Clockwork soldiers to deal with. And unfortunately, our dark vision once more comes up short, being unable to see them, so it's time for an upgrade. And for far reach as well too, why not? We have the runes. It'll come in handy. So, the Clockwork soldiers, we'll discuss them in more depth as we go along, but one thing the game does a really good job of is really differentiating them from the human gods. They really do feel like unfeeling, unthinking machines just following orders. And it can make them easier or more difficult to handle depending on any given situation.
In part, I made this place for luxury and spectacle, I suppose, but it's more than that. This place is a testament to engineering itself.
And yeah, if you haven't realized by now, Jindosh will be providing color commentary for the duration of our stay.
If this plays, the machine is recharging the magnetic coil.
So yeah, this is the first instance of what I mean of these being cold, unfeeling, unthinking machines. If I did that with a human god around, there's a good chance they would have seen me, as they'd constantly be swiveling their head and looking around. But the Clockwork soldiers, if they're not looking directly at a location, you are free to be there, so long as you're silent, and they will never ever notice you. They don't even turn their heads all that much. Oh, and as far as this map of the mansion goes, it may look complex, but...
An oversimplification, I assure you.
Thank you, Jindosh.
Sounds like someone's in the building. Should we wake the Clockwork?
It'll wake up on its own if a fight breaks out. They're blind, but they can still hear.
Creepy to know they might be listening to us. Can they understand what we're saying?
No. No more than an audiograph machine can.
So, what makes this mission especially difficult, doubly so if you're going in blind without a foreknowledge of all the gods' pathing patterns, is the fact that you have to deal with both human gods and the Clockwork soldiers. And they are a pretty nasty combination. Oh, and this little note here, apparently Mr. Jindosh has some visitors. Nobles looking to purchase a few of his soldiers. Mayhap we'll encounter them.
Stand clear! I'm bringing up the arc pylon!
Well, I don't exactly know what that's about, but it doesn't sound like anything good. Let's just deal with this guard while we have the opportunity and then check that arc pylon out. And this door is indeed locked. And I never find the key, I'm not even sure where it is. And yeah, that's the arc pylon for you. Needless to say, it pretty much renders the entirety of that room verboten to us for the moment.
Ah, the space behind the walls.
And we can thank our good old pal Sokolov for inventing that. Thank you, Sokolov. However, while we can't go into that room, we can go into the adjacent rooms.
I know where you are. I love to sit there, smoking and sketching out new ideas.
And even if Jindosh knows where we are, he's not exactly alerting his guards to our presence, so making use of the space behind the walls, we're pretty free to explore the place. You'd think the god's AI would be set up to explore any of the rooms he comments on, but unfortunately it's not. Definitely a missed opportunity by Arcane.
By the outsiders, Harry on!
That is a really good swear, I must say. So yeah, that is the sheer utility of the upgraded Far Reach. You can grapple anyone and just tell them to get over here.
You've encountered my arc pylon. The electrical discharge from my clockwork makes these obsolete, but I keep this one out of nostalgia for Sokolov's dated designs. Breathtaking. According to the scales beneath the floor and my acoustic sensors, you move quite quickly.
You'd think at these prices, the man wouldn't keep us waiting.
There's only one Kirin Jindosh. He can charge whatever he likes. Besides, you're rich enough to afford a couple of the Clockworks. I happen to know you've doubled your fortune since the Duke took over the silver mine.
Lower wages means higher profits, but it's my time that's precious. I'm not used to waiting.
Neither am I. When was the last time someone had me waiting for more than an hour? I can't remember. It's almost titillating.
How many Clockworks did you say there were? It's a numbered set, if I recall.
It is indeed, but 36, 46? Very exclusive, whatever the count. Everyone at the Garden Club will be green with envy.
When I think about it, your presence implies a great deal. It's very impressive that you survived Delilah and made it down here to Karnaca, all without the aid of your infamous father.
There he goes again. Who do you suppose he's talking to?
It explains the delay at least. If there is a break-in, I hope the Clockworks deal with it quickly. I'm tired of waiting for Jindosh.
Oh, you're tired of waiting, eh? Then why don't I move you right along?
We're moving at last, but where is Jindosh?
Yeah, you can have a lot of fun with the machinery of this Clockwork mansion here.
I used to dream of visiting all the far corners of the world.
That, more than any other reason, is why I consider this to be the best mission in the game and one of my favorite levels in a video game, just period.
Oh look, it's one of the clockworks. But what is it doing? Is this some sort of maze?
It's obviously a chamber for conducting experiments and tests.
How would you know? You can barely wind a watch.
Jindosh isn't here. Do you suppose we're in danger?
Let's just stay here to be safe. I'm starting to rethink my...
I must apologize for not showing off their conversation in full properly. But this mission was long enough, and I, at this point, was starting to get tired of waiting around to show these things off. So I occasionally laze out here or there.
Hello, are you there? I can't sense your weight on the floors or the sounds of your breathing anymore, but it seems like a reasonable guess that somehow you've gotten beyond the inner walls of the house.
But yes, the design of this place is excellent. The concept is all well and good, but I've seen similar things like it in games before. Moving a lever to change the configuration of a given area, that's nothing new. What is new is exactly how Arcane pulled it off here.
So you powered down my arc pylon. How resourceful.
This location feels like a fully realized version of this concept.
One of these days, I'm leaving the city. Back to the countryside for me.
Because everything does fit together properly. There's no spaces on the sides of maps where levels are waiting to be loaded in from when you flip the switch. Everything exists in a cohesive physical space that makes real-world sense, I'm pretty sure. It's possible that Arcane did do a little bit of fudging. I've never looked at the level data, and I don't even know if that's possible. But at the very least, just from playing it, it very much feels like a real physical space, even if it's one that couldn't really exist in real life. And that is just super impressive. And that's just from a conceptual standpoint. Actually playing through, there are so many ways you can tackle the different situations here.
Why would you worry about such a thing? We've been here for months, but we've barely seen a third of the house. If he can replace members of the Grand Guard with those blasted mechanical men, why not us?
Do you have to ask? Can you imagine one of them pouring tea? It might take your hand off.
Give Jindosh time. He'll figure that out too. We'll be out on the streets.
I wouldn't last a night outside, and neither would you.
After our last unfortunate encounter with civilians, I decide to ignore this one completely. Better just to not deal with it.
Does hiding your face intimidate your enemies? Or merely conceal your own fear?
That head over there is the prototype face for the Clockwork soldiers. And it's actually a rather interesting little detail.
Be careful. This was devised to test the limits of the Clockwork soldiers. Quite dangerous. If you're really looking for Sokolov, that old nag is around here somewhere. Increasing oil tank temperature.
The in-universe reason for the head being changed is that it was too human and people were trying to approach them.
Still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you. And treat them like a human. The faces were just too friendly to the people of Karnaca. The real-world reason is kind of the opposite. Arcane found the original human face designs to be a little bit less intimidating than they had intended, and so replaced them with the more bird-like heads. Just a fun little fact there for you. So you may have noticed a guard noticing no good behavior. And that is just all part of my master plan. Actually, if I'm being honest, that was mostly a coincidence. I was expecting her to not notice, she usually doesn't, and then to warp over to her and knock her out from behind, but honestly it worked out better that way. So yeah, these were the two aristocrats who were here to purchase a few of his Clockwork soldiers. And then they ended up having a threesome with one of his guards. You know, when they say eat the rich lady, they don't mean like that. Well, whatever, we're just going to move on. And run into a wall.
The original Sokolov version is inelegant but effective. This one has been perfected by yours truly. You're quite close now. I can't remember any other visitor getting so far. Do you feel pride? Anticipation?
Despite his assertions that he's perfected it, this doesn't really operate differently than any other wall of light we've seen. I think by perfected, he just means he thought to put the power source behind the wall of light, instead of in front of it for people to tamper with. You know, I didn't really understand it before, but wow, Jindosh really is a genius.
What cruelty is this? With this machine, maybe you won't have to die after all, Jindosh.
And yes, that note informs us of a non-lethal option for this mission. One that is quite ironic. Jindosh has been working on an electroshock machine in an attempt to convert Sokolov over to his side. However, the most success he's had with his test subjects is just to make them simpler, in the old-fashioned sense. And let's just say that in the near future, Jindosh 2 will be seeing things through a simpler lens. Which, I'm just gonna take a moment of your time to complain about this. I'm not a really huge fan of as a non-lethal option. When I got to this mission for my first time, I was expecting maybe to be able to convert Jindosh to Emily's side. After all, they had basically done the same with Sokolov in the last game.
Now that your last moments, the last vision you behold. Oh, good show. You've overcome one of my Clockwork soldiers from the sound of it. Surprising, given your coddled upbringing.
I like how we just straight up interrupted Jindosh's monologuing there, forcing him to readjust what he was saying, much like I often have to do. Oh, and what I'm doing here is every one of these Clockwork soldiers has a plaque that you can scavenge, and if you collect them all, you end up getting an achievement. Unfortunately, they often end up so scattered or mixed up among the other detritus of the machines that they're basically impossible to actually find. But yeah, the game either allows you to kill Jindosh or remove his intelligence, and converting him to your side despite it benefiting everyone involved is never an option.
Can it be? Is that young Emily Kaldwin?
Anton, save your strength. I came to take you out of here.
Jindosh has bigger plans than you know. An army of his Clockwork soldiers. It would be the end.
I'm going to visit Jindosh too, old friend.
Oh, you've taken Sokolov. Now what?
You'll be safer in the carriage, Sokolov. Then, I owe Jindosh a visit.
Oh hey, it's Grim Alex. Nice seeing you in such a wonderfully styled portrait. Sokolov still has his stuff. But yeah, we are now in a de facto escort mission situation. I mean, we could leave Sokolov here or somewhere else that's relatively safe. Go deal with Jindosh then and go back and retrieve him, but that would take too long, so he's coming with us. It's actually one of the things I really like about this mission, aside from the wonderful design of the mansion itself, is the fact that you're given two main goals: eliminate a target and rescue another target, and you can choose to do either of them first, and which one you do first changes the way you proceed through the mission, and it's really cool.
Astonishing. You freed Anton Sokolov.
Oh, don't worry, buddy, I will absolutely be reaching you. I just have a different pathway in mind. And yeah, once you've rescued Sokolov, that's when Jindosh orders his guards down here. At least I'm assuming that's why they're coming down. But a quick exit renders them moot.
Sokolov is a strange mind. I thought his scientific work would be distorted by his passions. In fact, they are inextricably linked.
Of course, even if the guards below are never going to be a threat again, the ones up here certainly are. So we do have to be careful. We do have the height advantage, but we're still close enough to the soldiers that they will spot us if we're a bit too open.
Nothing then.
But as we've well learned by now, that still gives us plenty of options.
What is it that motivates you? Intelligence? Passion? Perhaps it is something I cannot measure, but I will try.
And though there are plenty of Clockwork soldiers about, as long as we avoid alerting the guards and otherwise making a ruckus, they aren't ever actually a threat. It's only when they're already patrolling that they can be tricky to deal with, but as we've seen before, as long as you're careful, you can still make it past them even then. Oh, and this machinery here is for dispensing whale oil canisters and filling them with whale oil. If you ever need one of them to power something, or, I don't know, maybe lob at a guard to make them and all their friends nearby explode, well, it's there for the taking. And just glancing over here, if we were to actually move through those windows, which I'm avoiding because that can cause enough noise to wake up the Clockwork soldier there, which I'd like to avoid. But if we were to head over to there, we'd end up in the same spot where the room where the aristocrats were waiting was.
You found my bedroom, though I confess sleep usually eludes me. My mind won't stop turning.
Again, this place is designed with a real physical presence and cohesiveness in mind. And it's just so great. I'd really be surprised if I'd ever come across another mission in another game with this gimmick that's actually done better. I really do feel like Arcane have done this idea perfectly. So one other way you can deal with Clockwork soldiers is you can sneak up on them and rewire them. It's a little bit more tricky to do if they're active, but if they're still like this, it's no biggie. So now with them not being alerted to us, we are free to wander about. And yeah, once again, if you've disabled the arc pylon, or if you can just stay at the edge of its range long enough, you can instead warp your way up here as a means of getting into the upper levels.
Hope you don't fall and die out there. Might be hard to clean up. The smell, you see.
As I've said before, there are a lot of different ways that you can tackle this mission, both conceptually and in just the nitty-gritty of how you choose to make your way through the level. Well, we've cleared the nearby area of threat, so it's time to begin the escort mission once again. I gotta say, I think escort missions wouldn't have nearly the bad rap that they do if you were given the option of just putting down your escort for a time to deal with whatever threat is ahead. Actually, thinking about it, I know that for a fact because that's kind of how Resident Evil 4 handles its escort stuff. And rarely do you see people complaining about that.
Ramsey and the Crown Killer were just the start. I need to break down Delilah's remaining allies. Jindosh, the Duke, all of them.
I really don't get why she has that line there, like, yeah, that's what we were already doing there, Ems. Way to restate the obvious. You know, he may be a horrific, amoral sociopath, but he is correct about that.
I'll have questions about that. Once I have you restrained.
I have questions about that too. That's what I was thinking when I was going through this part. I was completely bamboozled as to why this Clockwork soldier suddenly died.
Another Clockwork down. Each of those costs a princely sum, I assure you.
And then its compatriot followed suit. So I actually did a little bit of research, and one little detail that I had completely forgotten about, mainly because I don't usually bother to rewire them, I find it unnecessary, is that after rewiring them, they will malfunction and explode after a few minutes. So if you're hoping to use them as an ally, you do have a time limit. This here is another note that informs you of the electroshock machine. Plenty of ways to learn about it, although I'm pretty sure you can interact with it even if you don't exactly read about it. Anyway, now we get to the fun part, me messing around with these levers, trying to get the rooms into their correct configurations for fully exploring, and taking way more time than I really by all rights should be to do so. And also nearly crushing myself against the ceiling in a few instances. Yeah, I know this level well, but by no means perfectly. See, Jindosh agrees with my earlier statement of this being a very well realized level.
Shifting the walls and floors as if you were born here. Clever. Or are you just moving things at random?
A little of column A, a little of column B. And yeah, as you can tell by my hapless camera movements, here is where I'm really starting to be confused. I don't want to miss this watch, it's an extra 150 coin. And I thought there was a passageway over there, but no, that's only in this next configuration. Yeah, you have to play around with this stuff for a while to have it cemented in your head, and even then it can still end up leaking out quite easily. At least that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
So many events in motion, each exerting subtle gravity. With Delilah, a new empire could be drawn, and all the old barriers broken. Much could be accomplished. My Clockwork soldiers have played their part, but each costs more coin than a wealthy man sees in a lifetime. It could take years to find a solution on my own. But if Sokolov can be tamed, together we might refine the process, making new Clockworks at a fraction of the cost. Whether I seduce my old teacher with the thrill of discovery, or whether I'm forced to apply the clamps to his flesh and turn on the voltage, no matter.
Yeah, no matter how you look at him, Jindosh really isn't a pleasant person at all. And I can kinda see then why the options for dealing with him are so black and white. And there's really no option of befriending him, but I'm still disappointed the game doesn't offer you the opportunity to do that. Just looking at that from a more realistic perspective, it would be the most sensible option. As dangerous of an ally as he could potentially be.
This could be the end of the Isles.
Especially since Emily presumably wouldn't be capitulating to him by offering him infinite test subjects like the Duke was. With the proper preparations, he could totally be controlled, and he is an unrivaled, unparalleled genius, even among his peers. And unlike the real world, the setting of Dishonored is one where one man really does hold the keys to the kingdom, as it were.
That's it. Closer and closer. I'm waiting.
But yeah, that's the last I'll complain about that, so don't worry if you're getting bored by that. Oh, speaking of being bored, Jindosh's letter on his own legacy, pass. Although it is worth exploring this room because it will restock your supplies if you're short. As we saw in the assessment chamber, stun mines are fantastic for dealing with the soldiers.
At last, Imperial Majesty, you found me. You realize you're only the the second person to set foot in this room, the most sophisticated laboratory in the Isles. Please, try not to damage anything as you die. Clockwork soldiers, dispatch this intruder!
And as it turns out, we'll have to be dealing with a few more of those soldiers. The way we've chosen to approach Jindosh, we have no choice. And by the way we've chosen, I don't mean the direct approach via his own private elevator.
I wonder, does it get under your skin, knowing that Delilah is leaving your chambers a dun-walled tower?
Even if we tried to sneak up with Farreach, we'd still have to deal with this situation as it is. Unbeknownst to you, but very knownst to me.
Come out and end this trivial game of cat and mouse. I have important work to do.
There was a very specific decision we made way back at the entrance of the Clockwork Mansion that guided how this attempt through it would go. And we'll be seeing the alternate option you can take in the appendix, so even if you don't normally check out those episodes, do check out this one, at least at the start of the Clockwork Mansion section. Because what you'll see there is one of the other reasons why I consider this to be one of the best levels in a video game, period. Oh, and while talking about that, we just kind of casually eliminated Jindosh. I told you that Farreach upgrade would come in handy. Of course, getting rid of him doesn't automatically get rid of these soldiers. He's not a load-bearing Jindosh. And though I try to be clever and rewire this one without it discovering me, it doesn't go well. Alright, it's combat time.
Back-facing detection. Rear visual activity. Combatant executed.
And that's why you don't want to get into open combat with a Clockwork soldier. As easy as they can be to avoid, once you're actually up in front of one and fighting them, they are fearsome opponents. So how's about we deal with this one in a bit more stealthy of a manner? Getting just barely spotted, encouraging him to move over and right into our trap. Yeah, there's a reason why I upgraded our stun mine uses post-haste. It is far and away the best way to deal with Clockwork soldiers. So, we've knocked out Jindosh, but we really haven't dealt with him. In a more permanent sense at least. We leave him around, he's just gonna wake up and get back to his usual trouble, so we're gonna have to find that electroshock machine. First though, a little bit of looting. He has some useful stuff around his office, such as that blueprint we picked up, as well as a painting of Sokolov. You have to wonder, if he hates Sokolov so much, why does he have a painting by and of him hanging above his office? Starting to think Jindosh might be a little bit yandere there for Sokolov. Well, that aside, welcome to Jindosh's laboratory now that we're actually free to explore it.
This must be the electroshock machine Jindosh mentioned.
So, we can't just start shocking Jindosh's brain immediately. First, we have to power the machine.
Anton Sokolov, once the royal physician
Which this paper goes over.
and head of the Academy.
The other lab machines are draining away too much electricity.
The most sought-after painter in all the Empire. My hero in younger days. Now, my puppet.
If you're going to use this inelegant-looking device against me, get on with it, Jindosh. Though I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish. I must admit to feeling a bit of professional curiosity as to the function of the apparatus.
Patience, friend, patience. The sequence of events is important. You'll come to understand my electroshock machine, but when? Before or after that light leaves your eyes? And where does it go when it disappears? Who will tell me that?
Has anyone ever loved the sound of his own voice as much as you do, Kieran? Perhaps the device could tell us that.
No, sadly it cannot. But what it can do is take from you the thing you love the most. Your precious intellect. If you won't agree to collaborate on the next Clockwork prototype, I'll use the device on that brain of yours, Sokolov.
I refuse. If I'm to be a drooling idiot, at least I won't be bothered by any more of your rambling.
The electroshock machine should work now.
So yeah, a lot of people have trouble with this puzzle, but all that you need to do to solve it is just make it so that the docks that consume the lowest amount of power are adjacent to the electroshock machine. That's it. But before we flip the switch, let's find out a little bit more about Jindosh.
Grand inventor for Sokolov. He dreams of an army of mechanical soldiers. His invention, the Silvercraft. It combines mercury and light on a plate, and an image appears. Some are delighted, some terrified. He has a great mind for innovation, invention, progress. Perhaps even greater than Sokolov. So young when he attended the academy, so quiet then. They hardly noticed him, but he took it all in, understood. Perhaps even better than they did. He works with Duke Luca Abel. They share overlapping interests, but only use one another. He's thinking the test subjects are all broken beyond repair, and it's time to obtain a fresh batch. At the academy, the other students and most of the teachers, they couldn't comprehend half of what he was telling them, even at 16. Such questions he asked as a child, just free from the crib. Others grew to fear him, just as he grew to love them. He waits for the breathing and the blood to stop, then the brain and the light from their eyes. He loves that moment when the eyes change, finds it fascinating. He longs for an adversary worthy of his intellect. It is not vanity. There are few who could match him. His mother asked, "Why did you do that to the cat?" Young Kieran only wanted to know what was inside, how it worked. Her distress puzzled him. The new Duke will let him have all the test subjects he wants. An endless supply. Almost arrested before the Duke found him. Carted off to some dank hole behind iron bars for revolting crimes against his fellows. His experiments. Instead, the Duke gave him a title. It is important to him. He wants others to notice the complexity of his work, the genius of his innovations. These are his thoughts. So many years, he's imagined having his own teacher in a cage, like an insect under glass, begging to be released, admitting that his was the superior intelligence. No. There is nothing more about him. Not that I can see.
Well, it's time to flip the switch.
No! You don't know what you're doing! Anything! I'll give you anything you want! Stop! Don't do this! So much will be lost! An age of advancement!
Too bad it had to come to this, Jindosh.
And if I combine the acid against a copper plate, what does it do? I knew that a moment ago. Does anyone know the answer? I had an idea, but it's gone now. I'm very much afraid of what's happened. You can't have put me through that machine, but wait, what does it do? Please, kill me. Please make me die.
Let's see just how much Jindosh's mind has changed.
Something
memories flee from him as he seeks them.
Big is
all shifting, intermingling. Great theorems drift just beneath the surface, just beyond his reach.
Please help me find it.
But he cannot hold a thought for more than a few seconds. When he remembers, he is filled with rage and despair. The great cathedral of his mind, abandoned and ruined. For just a second, he had a new line of thinking, the solution to a great engineering problem. Now, lost. In a way, he is more content now than he has ever been. He thinks of his dinner later, and hopes for cabbage with pork. I've already told you his secrets.
And that's Dishonored for you. When you're not saving the world from evil witch empresses, you're committing incredibly morally dubious acts. That's actually kind of a funny thing about the two Dishonored games, is that oftentimes the non-lethal options for eliminating a target are far and away infinitely worse than the lethal options. What we've done with Jindosh here is nothing on what the previous game got up to though. I think probably the height was selling a woman into slavery in order to eliminate her. And that's all well and good if the series actually treated these very morally grey options as morally grey. But more often than not, they end up framing these low chaos options as objectively good, as the right thing to do. That this is the path Emily took to ultimately become a good and kind empress. And I kind of disagree with that for reasons that should be rather obvious. But yeah, that's enough of that. For now, we actually have to make our way out of the Clockwork Mansion, which turns out is rather difficult. You now have to deal with not one, not two, but 3 Clockwork soldiers. And as easy as it can be to sneak past one, sneaking past 3 is a rather tall order. Unfortunately, they're not distracted enough by a single bolt, so you know what? We picked up a few runes in our time here. Let's consider picking up a new power. And no, that power is not police sirens, as useful as that would be. Instead, it is a visual distraction. A doppelganger. Now, unfortunately, the doppelganger isn't terribly good at evading the Clockwork soldiers, but it needs only provide a momentary distraction. Yeah, let's get out of here. And good thing we came here via the carriage. Making our way back the long way with Sokolov in tow would not be all that great of a situation. So, for now, let's just enjoy our roller coaster ride back. Admittedly, the ambiance is somewhat muted by Sokolov's unconscious body, but it is what it is. Alright, well, now we're gonna have to sneak past the guards that were here again. But it's not like that should be any more difficult than it was sneaking up in the first place. Our options are somewhat limited since we're currently carrying Sokolov. Oh, seems they must have got up to a bit of violence. But we still shouldn't have any issues dealing with plain old guardsmen. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with plain old guardsmen anymore. I'm not sure who these new people are, but they look rather ominous, so let's maybe approach this a little bit more cautiously than just walking in front of them. And leave Sokolov here on this nice soft pile of leaves.
I hope you kissed your kids goodbye this morning.
Yeah, they seem to have done a number on the guards in this area. So, how exactly are we going to approach this situation? There's 3 of them, spaced about evenly enough that approaching without getting spotted is certainly going to be very tricky. Doubly so if we can't actually far reach over to a useful vantage point. There we go, that's better. Maybe make use of Domino here, not for its linking abilities, they're a bit too far apart from each other for that, but for its secondary purpose of tracking enemies. If you don't feel like using the annoying dark vision filter, you can instead mark people with Domino to always keep attention of where they are. I'm not sure if that's an intended use, but it certainly is a useful one, especially against these targets. As we take down these 2 easily enough, but the third...
Just jealous. If I want to dance, then I can twirl around all I want.
Yeah, she noticed what we got up to, and she's not lacking in special abilities herself. So, if it wasn't obvious by now, these are Delilah's witches. She sent them after us because she figured Jindosh wouldn't be able to keep us at bay, and what do you know? Despite it being the Duke's coup, I think we know who the real brains of that operation were. And if you're wondering why I'm wandering about here, I'm trying to find the first one we took out. And as it turns out, that's surprisingly hard. Dead and unconscious bodies are surprisingly easy to mix up, as it turns out. But there we go, there I find her. So yeah, this is the letter that explicitly informs you as to what I just informed you about. But honestly, the witches were more of a help than a hindrance, because they eliminated every god in the area, which means we have free reign of the place. Although Paolo's still kicking, so you don't want to head down that side alley, unless you want to get aggressive with him.
Welcome back.
So one nice thing about leaving the black market shop open is that you can use the upgrades you picked up in the mansion immediately. Not that this actually helps all that much, because the next mission has a black market in it, and it's available pretty much immediately, so this doesn't really aid us at all. It does allow us to restock on our supplies a little bit earlier, which certainly doesn't hurt, because it's not like we won't be dealing with no guards on the way to that next black market.
Come back soon. I mean, if I'm still here.
Oh yep, I will be coming back immediately. Just not by the front entrance. I prefer the back door. So yeah, these ladies mentioned they would need one more whale oil tank, but we don't have time for that. Let's just lob a grenade. And as it turns out, that works quite effectively.
What now? I can't go to the Grand Guard.
We are really on a record for ruining people's lives this episode, aren't we? Well, it's for the good of the Empire after all. Just keep telling yourself that, Ems. It is actually kind of odd, and it brings up an issue with the chaos system that I have, that actions like this, robbing the black market, as far as I'm aware, don't actually contribute chaos. Pretty much the only thing that does is killing people. Even though robbing her of her valuables and livelihood would presumably leave her in such a state that she would no longer be capable of contributing to society, and would likely just end up being another bloodfly corpse in a random building somewhere. I suppose that could end up hewing the chaos system a bit too close to a typical good-evil morality system, but I just feel that robbing these black market shops should have some sort of consequence, and as it is, they never really do. Not even something like the future black market shops beefing up their security. But ultimately, this really is just a nitpick of mine, and the fact that I have to nitpick at the game so finely to find things I dislike really tells you a lot about how quality the game is. Really, now that I think about it, I'm not even being particularly consistent with my nitpicks, given the fact that I had no problems robbing whoever had valuables in that safe. So maybe I'm just a big ol' hypocrite. Anyway, at this point, we're pretty much done with the mission. We've looted everything of major value, although we'll still be missing plenty of total coin at the end, I assure you. Actually picking up 100% of coins, or anywhere close to it in this game, is probably the greatest challenge it has to offer. But we picked up all the important stuff, and we have no more opposition, so let's go return Sokolov and make Megan's day.
You did it. How is he?
He's frail and wounded, but he'll recover.
I didn't think it was possible. You must have a story to tell. I'll hear it back at the ship.
Let's go then.
So yeah, that's mission 4, the Clockwork Mansion. And though I've named it as my favorite mission in the game, don't think it's all downhill from here. We are at the halfway point, and the game is only just starting to show its full hand. Until next time, then.